get in there, and once we've done our shoring and supported things, we might be in a situation where it's not as bad as we thought, but I always would like to err on the side of it's gonna be as bad and then some,
Yeah.
you know? So I'm really reluctant. However, talk to me in 2 months if I'm on that job, and I should be able to give you specifics. And again, I'm not trying to be a smartass in any way, but my numbers are accurate. And I do my work that way to be accurate. So when I come in and I'm in there and I'm preparing for phase two, my numbers are gonna be in line. So when you ask me for a gut check, I really don't like that too much, because I don't have enough information right now other than just knowing the approximate scope. That's just a huge guess.
Well,
So-
let me then ask you, so this schedule you gave, and excuse me, this is gonna sound like a dumb question, when you said that's everything, I thought this included time to actually do structural repair, but you're saying, no, this is just.
No, this is just pre-construction phase.
So
correct.
it won't be leveled and ready for structural repair until July?
Possibly, hopefully sooner.
Okay, all right.
And so, John, on that question, is there any way for you to sort of, with your experience with this kind of project, is there any way for you to say, okay, now that I sort of understand this pre-construction phase, and you've been in the building, is there any way to say, okay, I feel like the pre-construction phase, and I know there's a lot of unknowns, is maybe 50% of the structural work we're gonna do? Or instead of
you
putting a dollar on
quantify
it,
it,
could
I
you
mean,
put a percentage on what you see as the work
think,
there?
again, there's still a ton of unknowns,
Yes.
because the reason there's unknowns is when we shore it.
Right.
When you take a low area and raise it, what's happening over here and what's happening over here, those are the areas, like I put in my RFP, those are the things that with all my experience, I don't know how that's going to respond. So percentage wise, I would think maybe 20% is what we've done structurally at the end of our pre-construction, and again, that's a guesstimate.
Okay,
So the pre-construction is 20% of the overall picture, is what you're saying?
maybe, yes.
Maybe.
No, he said
And-
something.
But you have to understand, don't look at that and go, oh, well, that's only 20% of the cost, that means there's gonna be 80% more than no, because the shoring is a huge cost. So
Yeah.
you won't have that in the second phase.
And I also wanna be careful here, because, we kick this around, we're trying to get a feel for, what this is gonna cost us, but I'm afraid with the number of unknowns, we're gonna get really high numbers. I mean,
I don't know about that. I mean, it depends, obviously, if you have, just about anybody bid this, there's a lot of people that are gonna bid it high.
Yeah.
Because they'll be afraid of it.
Because of unknowns.
Right, so, again, once we get into phase one, and I would say if we start phase one, I think we said, just April 1st, by May 1st, I'm gonna have a
Very good idea,
accurate
yeah.
prediction of when is completion of phase one, and what do I think the associated costs for phase two are gonna
yeah,
be.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
So maybe we don't wanna have any kind of knee-jerk reaction to that right
No,
now.
100%, because, keeping in mind with the end goal here, right?
Yeah.
But it also becomes a threshold for pain. What's your tolerance?
Well, it is, and then it can also mean that it might mean more things are gonna get dumped on the developer.
That's
So-
what it's gonna make.
Well,
So
and it
we're
depends
trying
on
to.
who that developer is.
Exactly, and so, I think that your answer is really good, you've given us sort of a ballpark, but
That was off the record.
but it's off the record, it's also, you really won't know till you get into it.
Yeah, and like I said,
It's always that way.
it is.
We
And,
don't do
once the abatement's done, and again, we still need to address that soil, just have them do a once-over on it.
Yeah, we talked.
I'm thinking that soil's probably okay, I hope so.
Yeah.
But then, when we have our meetings with Emery and the structural engineer, we'll go out there and design, what are those foundations gonna be? So once we have those kind of talks, and Emery and I and the structural are all on the same page, then
Yeah,
I can go, okay, well, shoot, that's not gonna be as much as I thought it would be,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Okay.
So, and again, we would need some compaction testing, some soil evaluations down in that basement,
Of
so that
course.
we know, what our load bearing is.
Right, and Emery, that's included in y'all's piece with Jim's work, right?
No, Jim is not a geotechnical engineer.
Okay, okay.
That
Site,
will not,
site conditions,
that will not be expensive.
Yeah, that
It'll
would
be
be,
less than
that's not a
$3,000.
showstopper, it's just.
No, it's like $3,000 bucks.
Yeah, we might have missed
Yeah.
some scope there, but we can deal with that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay,
um,
Bob, we're on.
so-
Go ahead, Emery, go ahead.
before we move on to, question 2, John, is there any way to envision moving through pre-construction services with kind of, instead of a fully engineered and rented system, with site-built shoring that could potentially stay in place, even, if for some reason the county's budget or funding available hit a snag and the building has to kind of pause?
Sure. What I would suggest if that happens, because built-in-place shoring is so much more antiquated than the new
Right.
shoring that they have now, it's not cost-effective from both a labor and a material standpoint. The upfront cost of, and then you've got, what are you gonna do, repurpose the wood later on?
yeah,
So what I would suggest, if we ran into a snag at that point, then we would come in and have to secure all the beams that have been repaired, right, or secured. We'd have to come in and shore those with some beams to eliminate as much of the shoring as possible. That way it would cut the costs. But again, it would have to pencil out, right?
right.
So could you share with me, like, what is your monthly rental for shoring?
Well, that's still up in the air. So
What
worst
would be
case
the
scenario,
most? Yeah,
about 15 grand a month.
okay.
Best case scenario, about half of that, 7,500 a month.
Yeah,
So, again, if we are looking at it and you guys are like, hey, let's pause, we have to look at this or whatever, then what I would go is, okay, it's gonna cost us $30,000 in timbers to get them in, and then another 20,000 in labor. So we're looking at 50 grand, which you guys might have this resolved in 2 months. So we're looking at $15,000 in rental over 50 grand. That may be a good bet. We'll have to know how severe the snag is and what's involved in reconciling it.
But Emery, wasn't kind of maybe the nature of your question, not comparing built in place versus rented, but built in place to remain part of the structure?
Yes, to stay there permanently, so like in the
Permanently as part of the,
basement.
part of the structural solution.
Yes, the base, right, Emery, because that was the way I understood we were gonna do it, is nobody's gonna be using the basement, so the structural supports in the basement, which are one of the most critical,
They're the
right?
most important.
Could be built in place and then
Stay there.
and stay there permanently, and you could overdo it if you needed to.
Well, once you level things, once you shore it and we have it level and we see what's damaged and we,
yeah,
secure that. Sometimes we might secure it by saying, all right, it's gonna be too expensive to sister this. We're gonna run 2 beams from this opening to this opening with a timber in them, So it's, again, it really is, it's like an a la carte. You're looking at this and this and going, okay, what's gonna be most cost effective?
If you pull the thread on the other is, I'm gonna build this shoring in place as part of the permanent structural solution.
That would have
You
to be
really can't do
engineered.
that, you kinda need the shoring there to kinda see
Yeah,
what that
correct.
is.
We don't know the extent of what we're dealing with until we have it leveled, really.
exactly.
And the reason that I didn't go with a built-in place is because with the shoring now in place, once we have it, it's nothing to adjust this one 1.5 inches. The next one needs to go up 3 inches versus this one over here that only needs
Gotcha.
2. You can do that
Yeah,
in a shorter, easier time span, as opposed to trying to raise one up and slam one in. It just doesn't, and then you're shimming things, and that doesn't, you can't do that with shoring. You have to be
yeah.
site specific on each
That's
timber.
So the rental shoring is
It's
more
superior.
efficient and effective and,
Well,
It's
it also
definitely-
helps you what you need to do for the permanent solution.
And we're
Yeah.
talking time,
Yeah.
right? So we've got professionals that are installing, we've got engineers that are looking at the existing plan, the existing layout, and the existing condition. They're providing engineering to you, which takes away liability from all of us, right? So it's a threefold thing where it's like, there's only pros in here for the temp shoring. The only con is the rental, and quite honestly, with the speed, if it increases time, then that's saving money, and that's getting us to phase 2, right?
Okay.
That's how I looked at that.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with John, the value of a engineered and rented shoring system, both to make leveling easier, and also the value of it, like it easily pays for itself if you can get it out of there on your anticipated schedule.
Correct. Agreed.
But I also don't disagree with John without, there's some wood to knock on. With as many unknown conditions as we're facing, what High Plains really anticipates and expects and hopes is that we can use more of the existing structural material than you might initially think looking at it.
Yes.
Yeah, I hope so too. I agree, and I'm all for that.
Yeah.
And I think our structural, when I walk through the building with our structural, who you'll love, he's amazing, he felt that way too. That the quality of the wood that's in that building
Yeah.
is irreplaceable.
Great. So, Bob, would you like to
Sure.
lead question 2 through 5 maybe?
2 through 5, and some of these, like this first question might kind of sound a little insulting, but there's a more point to
Not
it.
at all.
Are you confident that your means and methods can complete the project safely and successfully based on your plan?
Yes.
And the reason I'm asking that is based, and it's really trying to tap your experience. You've seen the building, you've come up with an idea. You're not, unless there's some completely unknown condition, there's no reason this shouldn't work.
No.
Okay.
It's not, yeah.
And so that way, we're not just get you over there, get you all set up and go, oh, guess we can't do this. You think you can do it. Okay. This next one is really a good question. Was your 421, 235 pricing a not to exceed GMP, or was it a lump sum?
Both. It's
Okay.
a lump sum saying it's not going to exceed that number.
Okay, but if it costs you less, do we get the savings?
No,
Okay,
no.
so
And
it's a
it-
lump
and
sum.
No, it's a lump sum with a not to exceed. It's both.
Well,
So-
lump sum would be not to exceed.
Correct.
Right.
But not to exceed in my book means
That's it.
that's it. So we're gonna lock in at that price, and we're gonna have to get
Not
creative.
to exceed it.
Correct.
Well,
Because
and-
then I'm owning the risk.
Right.
Where if I am cost plus,
Right.
what do I care about the schedule? What do I care? I mean, I'm just being honest.
I'm
with you
listening
guys.
to you, but that goes to the next point, because
Yeah.
that number's frightening.
Yeah,
really?
it makes the project not doable
Yeah,
for us.
Yeah.
So would you entertain a cost plus approach to that?
Right.
I don't know if I would. I guess I would consider it. Sure.
I mean,
Because
we
that's a
got your
conversation.
rates and we got your markup.
Mm-hmm.
It would just be a matter of, see, that's what I thought your not to exceed meant, is, well, we'll track our costs, and if we reach this number, we won't exceed it, if we won't. I get the whole risk point, okay?
No, listen. I love not to exceed if we're doing a cost plus, because I can't lose.
You can't lose,
Right.
but I guess my point is,
But I also.
when you also do a not to exceed, you gotta throw some risk in there.
That's exactly right.
And we're paying for that risk, and so we're looking at this number and saying, and that goes to the next one, is that a pessimistic or optimistic number? Well,
That's a
for me-
realistic number.
Well, if it were me and I was not gonna exceed it, I would make sure that I got a pretty damn good risk factor.
Exactly.
And-
Well, and you have to have a risk factor, because then it's on me. And the reason I thought that was a benefit to the county is because you don't have to worry about pre-construction phase and all the securement
Right.
that's being done. You're not sitting there at night going, oh, I wonder what they're gonna find tomorrow.
No, you're not,
You know,
but
that's,
it,
and that's where I thought.
but it
was
really
the
depends on
advantage.
how much. If it were me and I were in your shoes,
Mhm.
I would not be throwing a low number out. Because if
Oh,
I have to take on the risk of it, and and because we've also had others maybe a little nervous about it because of how risky it all is, that if that number is, I guess I might as well say it, if that's a pessimistic number to cover you, then is it in both of our interests to do it on a cost
Yeah.
plus basis?
Yeah, and I would tell you, when I bid, work, like I said to Emery earlier, my numbers are accurate. My numbers are, on point with where it should be. And then I back into the schedule and the project based off those numbers. So, my project management side of things, I'm gonna be tracking things at a 30-minute increment, at least,
Yeah.
to know, hey, we're behind the 8 ball here, and this is how we keep running efficient. We need to be at this benchmark by noon.
But you would be doing that whether it was lump sum or not, right?
100%, absolutely, yeah. But I'm just saying, you're talking about pessimistic numbers.
No, I'm with you. You
Optimistic.
basically said, hey, I could see I got 10 days here, I'll have a crew,
Exactly.
and I'll be spending this much money. And then, by the way, now that I'm all set, well, anyway, that just gets the building short.
Mhm.
It's something to think about, okay?
Yeah, well, listen,
Well, we,
the whole reason that I bid this,
no, go ahead,
the
please.
whole reason that I bid this project, is because, as you guys know, I've been interested in buying this project. That's not a conflict of interest, the way you guys are doing it, because what I'm gonna do is do the absolute best I can do to make sure that if I were the person to buy it, then great, I've done A, B, C, and D
All right.
to the best of possibility,
Mhm.
and that's going to decrease my costs from the development standpoint later, right? So,
And maybe maybe with this, if these numbers, are realistic, and I know I've talked to enough people in the construction business right now, and the market is still insane.
well, I will tell you this, it scared me. I tried to stay low,
Yeah.
and it made me nervous when I
Yeah.
submitted it. If
Yeah.
that makes, you wanna talk
No,
about
so-
gut numbers.
That may force us to sort of relook at what we can afford to do. What our
Yeah.
scope of
Well,
work
and
is and
what-
how we can pass this
How,
to it.
how far do you wanna go on phase 2? What is your
Yeah.
combined amount that you wanna spend?
Yeah, where do
And
we
then, like I
stop?
said,
Yeah.
that's where Emery and I and the structural can look at this and go, okay, we know our target on phase 2 has to be whatever, 500 grand or whatever it is. We have to come, how can we value engineer this in a manner that's going to keep this in line? And then we do it,
Right.
it's not like we're trying to get away on the cheap. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying you
No,
put your
I
heads
think-
together with the architect and the engineer, and all three of our experience, we might be able to do C instead of B, because C is gonna save us 50 grand in the long run, and it's going to achieve the desired finish that we need.
It's not
So-
gonna save us 50 grand.
Well, I mean, it's
If
gonna,
we go
it's
this
gonna,
way.
it's gonna save you guys 50 grand. I'm talking about phase 2 now.
Oh,
You know,
okay, okay,
So
okay.
we get phase 1 done, and phase 2 is gonna be part of that coordination and looking at
Okay.
what we have and how are we going to move forward? What's the best way to
Right,
get through it, and what numbers are we trying to work in? Because I gotta be honest, every project I've ever designed has been for a private client.
Yeah.
So budget is how we start. We have our number,
Mhm.
now we need to develop a specification and a scope of work that's gonna come in within that budget. And then if we put it out to bid and we came back and we got bidders that were less, great, then we could add a little more to it to make it even that much better. But again, that was dealing with a private clientele, so with private money.
Okay, well, I think you kinda answered mine. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a realistic number, you think about a cost plus, but you're telling me, hey, my numbers are realistic.
They are
You're
realistic.
probably gonna wind up in the same place, but,
I think we'd be within, 10%.
and then, but based on what you've seen, this is a doable project safely
Oh, yeah.
with your approach.
Yeah, I wouldn't entertain it if it wasn't. And,
Okay.
and if I tell you it wouldn't make me nervous, I'd be a fool. Because every job that I've ever been on, and like I touched on it, when you get to my age, you realize you don't know, you know a lot, but you don't know what
I
you
know
don't know.
everything.
Don't you know? Yeah.
And that's what makes me nervous. is just, and I account for that too, but it's like, you know what to watch. We're raising here, most eyes would be over here, I'm looking back here, because I know where, so yeah, safety wise, the first thing we do, we don't move anything, we
Yeah.
secure everything.
Right.
We
Make
wanted
it safe.
somebody in there that's got experience, smart, and safe, not taking any chances.
There's just no
You know,
money in it, it
yeah.
really isn't.
Okay, all right, I guess we're on 6.
Yes, so again, this question kind of ties together everything we've been talking about up until this point, understanding risk, understanding unknowns, understanding project schedule, the importance of the schedule, especially relative to John's conviction that an engineered and rented shoring system will be, in the end, the most advantageous. But also understanding that he was very much trying to keep his number low, but proposing a price for strictly pre-construction services as a lump sum. Would it be more advantageous to the county to include repair of the structural elements, basically some phase 2 work, in the scope of this owner-contractor agreement on a cost-plus basis?
I would think so, because, well, it depends. So there's two parts. I would think, my knee jerk would be like, well, yeah, the more we do now
Yeah.
at one time makes sense, because
That's
it's
in
cost
phase
effective.
2.
Now, if we're talking about phase 2, and are we doing that, where's the breaking point between phase 1 and phase 2? How much can we do to prepare for phase 2? A lot, right? So I mean, yeah, I think the cost savings would be there if we rolled more of phase 2 in with phase 1. I don't think it would be responsible to try to do it now. I think it would be responsible to do it 30 days into the project, determine what we can add to it, or what is phase 2 going to consist of totally, so that we can, hey, I mean, while my guys are working, I can be working with Emery and the structural.
You bet. You bet.
And then, you know what I'm saying? So then we're coming up with crystal clear numbers that would work, or we say, okay, this is an unknown, so we'll do this cost plus.
Yeah.
Because we really, we
Because
might,
otherwise you throw us a number and say.
right, and I wouldn't wanna do that, because again, my home and my place for the rest of my life is here. So it's in my interest to make sure that we're on great terms from start to finish. And so how do I do that? By one, delivering a great product, but also coming in at budget or under budget, if possible.
Well, in my view too, that phase 2 is gonna be tough to price because you don't
Not
really
necessarily.
know. Well,
It's tough to price now, but 30 days into it, it should be much clearer.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying, Bob.
Yeah.
okay.
That is really, he's right about the 30 days into the project. That's the goal of doing the alternative delivery method.
Right.
Is you have a contractor on board who, like John's been describing, once we get to a point, he will be much more confident in his numbers.
That makes sense
Yeah.
to me, quite frankly.
And then that's also flexibility is,
Yeah.
okay, we're not sure, and this would be combined, when I say we, I'm talking Emery and the structural. We're not sure about this here, we're gonna do some destructive testing here, we'll look in there, but we'll see how it responds to everything we're doing, and then we'll make a more educated decision. But if there's a portion of it, raising the ceiling height or whatever, you know, well, we're not sure what's gonna happen when we remove all of this here or whatever. And then we would be like, okay, we can do that as a cost plus. Like this portion of this can be cost plus, and we would be able to derive that relatively, you know what I mean? So we would break our costs into that portion, and that's where my accounting would come in,
Yeah,
you know, to play.
and then we could pull the trigger on phase 2 well, we would be partially into phase 2 to
Correct.
basically determining what phase 2 needs to be.
We're developing phase 2 as we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, I like that idea.
So Emery, are you familiar enough with alternative delivery method legally? That, I know we wrote it into the RFPQ to, be able to consider the contractor's bid that's doing pre-construction to be able to move into construction phase with them. Would we have to announce that again? If we did a
No.
cost plus basis?
No.
Okay.
The sign off from your grant entities to proceed with the alternative delivery method means you guys are perfectly fine to stay with the contractor selected for pre-construction services through the remaining project.
Very good.
I don't wanna be rude and drink without
No,
offering.
you're fine. Trust me, you don't wanna share a drink with me right now.
Okay. Are we on 8?
7, I believe.
7.
Well, we kinda
We
covered
kinda went
7.
through that.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we kinda talked shoreline system.
Yeah, the answer to 7 got tied into some of the answer to question 1. So yeah, moving on to question number 8. High Plains Architects did not do an exhaustive search, but we couldn't find your company name listed with the Montana Secretary of State. But we are also familiar with government entities not always having their records up to date. So
No,
which entity would be signing the contract?
JM Enterprises is my LLC, and I had to refile that when I got your email because I've had it since 2022 and haven't done anything with it,
Okay.
Oh,
and because I've been focused on my other 2 businesses. So I've already submitted it. It'll be approved on Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay.
So it wasn't the Secretary of State. It was me.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying. We kind of suspected as much.
Yeah,
You just lost a point on that.
that's fine. I got a couple to give. I
You
hope.
get a half a point for honesty and, okay, go ahead.
Great. So both High Plains Architects and the structural engineer that we work with have a great amount of experience with existing historic buildings. There is significant value to a future developer of the Weir building in ensuring that any work that is done now will not be detrimental to the potential to do renovation work in accordance with the Secretary of the Interior standards for the rehabilitation of historic buildings, which is always such a mouthful to say. But we also work a lot with the International Existing Building Code. This project fits under the repair category, even though we're proposing restructuring a portion of the roof. So that actually gives us quite a bit of leeway. That said, our structural engineer is committed to using current snow loads for the roofing scope of the project. He can think creatively through old buildings, but he doesn't take any chances. So what's your experience working collaboratively with design professionals to plan construction activities to save the owner cost?
Yeah, I mean, that, like I said, that's what I did since I started Site Consulting Specialists. We